Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. This time, we're going to be taking a look at internal developer platforms. You know, those platforms promising to make building software a little bit less like wrestling with the Hydra, and more like a leisurely drive down a scenic highway.
Well, it's certainly a pretty ambitious goal, but definitely one worth going for.
Yeah, I think we can all agree with that. So, you know, to understand why IDPs are creating all this buzz, you know, why everyone's talking about them, we need to kind of start by acknowledging this elephant in the room, right?
Yeah.
Software development. Even with all the incredible technology we have today, it can still feel incredibly inefficient and honestly kind of frustrating at times.
Right.
Can you kind of unpack that problem a little bit for us? Like, why is that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we see in traditional software development is this paradox. You have developers, right? They're surrounded by all of these really powerful tools, but they're so bogged down by just the sheer complexity of managing them all.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's almost like, imagine you have this state-of-the-art kitchen, right? But all the appliances are just scattered everywhere.
Yeah.
And there's no system, you know, like there's no system for prepping the ingredients. There's no system for cleaning up.
Right. So it's not that the tools themselves are bad. It's just that there's no cohesive way to use them all together. Yeah.
Exactly. And, you know, this lack of a unified approach, this lack of a unified system, it just leads to all sorts of problems. You have fragmented infrastructure. You have developers constantly having to switch between all these different tasks and all these different tools. And then there's also this burden of you build it, you run it, where developers are essentially responsible for every single aspect of the software lifecycle.
Yeah. You know, and all of that adds up to just so much wasted time and energy. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who feels this way, but it's like all that time and energy could be spent on, you know, actually building cool stuff, the stuff that we got into this industry for in the first place.
Precisely. You know, think about it this way. If a developer is spending, let's say, 50% of their time just wrestling with infrastructure, that only leaves them with 50% of their time to focus on, you know, actually creating those innovative features, solving those challenging problems, actually building the software, right?
Well, it's like asking a chef to spend, you know, half their time sourcing ingredients and fixing a broken oven instead of actually, you know, cooking. No wonder so many developers feel burnt out. And, you know, and it's not just the developers who suffer. I mean, it's the companies as well.
That's right.
Right? Like slower innovation cycles, missed deadlines, difficulty attracting and retaining top talent. It all kind of stems back to this underlying problem of developer inefficiency.
Precisely. And I think that's where the idea of internal developer platforms comes in.
Right. Yeah.
Or IDPs. That's what we're talking about today.
Right. So how do we move away from this chaotic, this fragmented way of working? I mean, is that what IDPs are supposed to do? Help us move away from all this?
You know, you got it out. That's the goal. You know, IDPs aim to solve these problems, all these challenges that we've been talking about, by just creating a unified experience, a streamlined experience for developers. You know, think of it as a paved road, right?
Okay.
Like it's this road that guides developers through the entire software development journey.
So instead of having to like hack their way through the jungle of tools and processes, you're saying developers can have like a clear path forward.
Exactly. And you know, it's not just like throwing together all the tools. It's not that's not what an IDP is.
Oh, okay.
IDPs are actually treated like products, like their own product. So you have dedicated teams focused on constantly improving the developer experience.
So it's this idea that like happy developers equal more productive developers. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, by companies investing in the developer experience, they're ultimately investing in better software, faster delivery times, and of course, a more engaged and motivated workforce.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get into the specifics here.
Okay.
What are some of those like the core components that make IDPs so effective? Like what is it about them?
Yeah. So I think one of the key ingredients, one of the most important things is the self-service infrastructure. So, you know, imagine you're a developer.
Right.
And you need to set up a new testing environment.
Okay.
Traditionally, this could take, you know, days, you know, back and forth with the operations teams, waiting for servers to be provisioned, all that stuff. But with an IDP, it's often as simple as a few clicks.
So it's about giving developers the autonomy to manage their own resources without having to, you know, go through all these different hoops and hurdles.
Exactly. But that autonomy, you know, it doesn't mean that we have to sacrifice security or compliance.
Right.
Because IDPs often incorporate what we call opinionated defaults. and guardrails.
Okay.
So basically, best practices for security, for performance, for regulatory compliance, they're kind of baked right into the platform.
Oh, so it's like having a set of invisible guidelines that, kind of make sure that the developers are adhering to all these standards, but they don't actually have to think about it all the time.
Precisely. It eliminates, decision fatigue. It frees up their mental bandwidth for more creative tasks.
Makes sense.
And then another crucial element, is this unified tooling and observability.
Okay.
So in a traditional setup, a developer might have to use like a dozen different tools for all sorts of stuff. Monitoring, logging, tracing, debugging, all different tools.
And each with its own like interface, its own kind of like weird quirks and its own like, learning curve.
Right.
It's exhausting.
Right. And IDPs address this, right? They bring all those critical functions into a single platform.
Oh, okay.
You have all your logs, all your metrics, all your traces, all in one place.
So instead of like spending hours hunting for clues, it's like all right there. Very easy to access.
Exactly. It makes it so much easier to diagnose and fix issues.
Mm-hmm.
And that minimizes downtime.
Which everybody wants.
Of course. And all of this is designed, right? All of this is designed with the developer's workflow in mind.
Okay.
So IDPs, they prioritize this seamless integration, these really intuitive interfaces. They're striving to create this experience that feels natural and effortless.
Yeah, and I'm kind of picking up on this theme, like this constant focus on developer experience.
Yeah.
It's almost like, IDPs are coming in and saying, hey, we get you, we understand your pain points, and we're here to make things better.
And that's exactly right. That's the shift. It's not just about the tools, it's about the developers, right?
Yeah.
It's about fostering this culture where developers feel valued, where they feel supported.
Yeah. So it's about creating an environment where, developers can actually enjoy building software.
Absolutely. When you free developers, you free them from these tedious tasks, you free them from these frustrating processes, that's when they can truly, unleash their creativity.
Yeah. Makes sense. Okay, well, I'm starting to see why there's all this hype around IDPs, why everybody's talking about them. But let's go beyond the, the theoretical, the hypothetical benefits here.
Okay.
What is the real world impact of these platforms? Like, what are we seeing in terms of how they're actually impacting companies?
Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing some pretty impressive results. I mean, one of the most significant is, I would say, the increased speed of delivery. By streamlining workflows and automating all those, tedious tasks, IDPs are enabling companies to ship new features and updates much, much faster.
So it's not just about, making developers happier, but it's actually about making companies more agile, more competitive.
Exactly. In today's world, being able to adapt quickly, respond to changes in the market, that's crucial for survival.
Oh, absolutely.
And IDPs are giving companies that edge, right? Mm-hmm. That edge they need.
Now, what about, we talked about speed, but what about the quality of the software? Does this smoother developer experience actually translate into better code?
It absolutely does. When developers have the right tools, when they have the right processes in place, they can just focus on writing cleaner code, more efficient code, more reliable code. And that, of course, means fewer bugs. It means less downtime, better user experience.
Yeah. So it's not just about shipping code faster. It's about shipping better code, period.
Exactly. And we can't forget about the impact on talent, right? Because when companies prioritize the developer experience, they become magnets for top talent.
Right.
Nobody wants to work in an environment where, they're constantly fighting their tools, where they feel frustrated all the time.
Right. So it's not just about technology. It's about creating this entire culture that actually attracts and retains the best minds in software development.
Absolutely. Companies they're finally realizing this. Investing in developer experience is not just a nice thing to do. It's really crucial. It's essential for success in today's world.
All right, well, let's dive into some concrete examples. Mm-hmm. You mentioned, I think, Spotify and Netflix earlier.
Yeah.
Both of them are obviously known for their innovative use of technology and, their commitment to developer autonomy.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about how they're using IDPs? Like, what are they doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start with Spotify.
Okay.
They have a huge engineering organization, right? Mm-hmm. Thousands of developers all over the world, all working on this platform that has, hundreds of millions of users.
That's incredible.
It is. So to manage all that complexity, they built this incredibly robust IDP called Backstage.
Backstage. Okay. So what makes that one so special?
So Backstage was designed to be this single platform where developers can do everything, manage their code repositories, their infrastructure, deploying their services, monitoring, you name it.
Oh, wow. So it's like giving their developers this master key
Yeah.
that just unlocks every door
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
in the Spotify universe.
That's exactly it. And it's this kind of seamless integration. It's this streamlined workflow that allows Spotify to innovate so quickly.
Okay.
They're constantly pushing the boundaries, right, of what's
Yeah.
possible in music streaming.
And what about Netflix? What are they doing?
So Netflix, they're another great example.
Okay.
They've really embraced this idea of the IDP, this philosophy, wholeheartedly.
Okay.
They have a very, very strong culture of developer autonomy, developer freedom, and their IDP reflects that.
So they're giving their developers the keys to the kingdom.
Exactly. They're trusting them to build these complex systems, to manage these complex systems.
Yeah.
All of this powers their platform.
Mm.
And that trust, that trust is what allows Netflix to stay on top.
Yeah.
As a leader in the streaming world, they understand that, by empowering your developers, you're empowering the entire company.
Okay, so we've talked about, Spotify and Netflix, these huge tech companies. But are IDPs only for these massive companies?
That's a good question.
Or can smaller organizations, can they benefit from this approach as well?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
In fact, I'd say, smaller companies, startups, they can often benefit even more from adopting this IDP approach.
Really? Why is that?
Well, think about it. Smaller organizations, they usually have very limited resources, right?
Yeah.
And their developers, they're often wearing multiple hats. So by implementing an IDP, they can streamline their workflows, they can automate all those tedious tasks, eliminate those bottlenecks, and that frees up time and resources, right? So they can focus on more strategic things.
Yeah. So it's almost like, it's giving a small startup, it's almost like giving them the firepower of a much larger organization.
Exactly.
Yeah.
IDPs they can level the playing field. They allow these smaller companies to compete with the big players by giving their developers that same level of efficiency and empowerment.
That's great. And it's really interesting to see how IDPs are, they're not just a tool, right?
Right.
It's this whole shift. It's this change in how we think about developing software.
Exactly. It's about empowering developers. It's about creating that culture of agility, and innovation.
And that's something that, companies of all sizes can benefit from.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's not just about efficiency, These IDPs, they can actually help smaller companies attract and retain that top talent.
Yeah. Yeah.
Developers, I think they're drawn to these organizations that really prioritize, the developer experience,
Yeah.
that give them those modern tools.
Right. Like it's a sign, like, hey, this company gets it. They understand.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And in today's world, in today's job market, that can be a big difference. So whether you're, a huge company or a tiny startup, IDPs can really offer this, a compelling way to be more efficient, to innovate faster, to have a more engaged, development team.
This all sounds, incredibly promising, but I imagine, in the real world, it's not always smooth sailing, right?
Yeah, of course.
What are some of the challenges? What are some of the things that companies might struggle with when they're trying to go down this IDP path? Like what are some of the roadblocks there?
Yeah, for sure. You're right. It's not a magic solution.
Right.
There's no silver bullet. I think one of the biggest hurdles is often, the culture, like the culture of the organization.
Okay.
Because IDPs, they require this shift in mindset.
Okay.
It's moving away from that traditional, we tell you what to do, that command and control approach, to this more, collaborative and empowering model.
Right. So it's about breaking down those silos between, the developers and operations.
Yeah,
Fostering that sense of, shared responsibility.
exactly. And that can be a big change, for some organizations.
Oh, yeah.
Especially, if they're used to that very traditional, very hierarchical, way of doing things.
It's almost like, going from a rigid assembly line to a much more agile, self-organizing team.
Yeah, it is. It's a different way of thinking. It's a different way of working. And that's where, strong leadership is really, really important. Leadership has to really champion this approach, this IDP approach, communicate the benefits, and create that environment that really supports this new way of working.
Yeah, so it's not just about implementing the technology. It's about fostering that that underlying cultural shift.
Exactly. The technology is just a tool, right? The real transformation, the real change happens when organizations really embrace this cultural shift. That's what IDPs represent.
Now, earlier you mentioned some technical challenges as well. What are some of those, like the technological roadblocks? What are some of the things that, trip companies up when they're trying to implement an IDP?
Yeah. So I think one common challenge is just, integration.
Okay.
Integrating all these different tools and technologies that make up an IDP.
Yeah, because it's not just about, picking the right tools and the right platform, but making
Yeah.
sure they all work together.
Right. Exactly. It's like putting together a puzzle.
Yeah.
All the pieces have to fit just right.
Mm.
And it can be pretty complex, especially, for organizations that have those legacy systems, those really, diverse technology stacks. So it's really important to have, that strong team, a team with the right expertise, the right experience.
Oh, yeah, I bet. I mean, you need people who, they understand the development side, they understand the operations side.
Yeah.
They can kind of bridge that gap, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You need people who can really bring it all together.
Okay, so we've talked about, the potential upsides of IDPs. We've talked about some of the challenges, in terms of implementing them. But let's be real here for a second. Like, are there risks?
Sure.
Like, what could go wrong? What are some of the things that could potentially go wrong if, a company isn't careful with their IDP approach? Like, what are the risks here?
Yeah, definitely. There are definitely some potential pitfalls, some things to watch out for. I think one common mistake, is just trying to do too much too quickly.
Oh, yeah.
Building an IDP, it's a journey.
Yeah.
Right. It's not a race. It's not something you do overnight.
So it's about starting small, right? Focusing on a specific area and then, kind of learning from that,
Yeah.
iterating, getting feedback.
Exactly. Don't try to, do everything at once.
Right.
Start with a specific problem, a pain point that an IDP can really address,
Yeah.
and then go from there.
Right. Like build up that momentum, get that buy-in.
Exactly. And another risk is, creating an IDP that's just too rigid,
Mm.
too opinionated.
Okay.
Because remember, the whole point of this is to empower developers,
Right.
not to restrict them.
Right.
So the platform, it should definitely provide guidance, it should provide support, but it shouldn't be, telling developers exactly how to do everything.
So it's about finding that balance, right?
Yeah.
Between like the structure and the flexibility.
Exactly. The best IDPs, they strike that balance.
Yeah.
They provide those guidelines, those guardrails, but they also allow for, experimentation. They allow for innovation. And finally, it's important to remember this. This is not like I said before, there's no magic here.
Right.
IDP is not a magic solution.
Right.
It's not going to magically, solve all your problems overnight.
Yeah. So it's about setting those realistic expectations and understanding that an IDP is a tool. It's a means to an end, not the end itself, right?
Exactly. It's about using that platform to help your developers do what they do best.
Yeah.
Which is to build amazing software.
Okay, let's shift gears for a moment. Let's talk about some more examples. I mean, we touched on Spotify, we touched on Netflix.
Yeah.
But I'm curious to hear about, are there other industries, are there other companies, maybe of different sizes, that are using IDPs in really interesting ways? Like, what are you seeing out there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are so many examples out there, companies doing really, really interesting things with IDPs. One that, kind of comes to mind right away is Amazon.
Okay.
They've really been pioneers in this space.
Yeah.
And their platform has played such a critical role in their ability to scale their operations, to deliver all those innovative products, those services at such a rapid pace.
Yeah. What I think is interesting about Amazon is, they essentially treat their internal development teams as if they were their own customers.
That's right. Yeah. They really apply that, that customer-centric approach, that same approach that's made them so successful in, e-commerce, to their internal development processes as well.
Mm.
Their IDP is really designed to provide this really seamless experience, this really intuitive experience, much like the experience that they try to create for their customers on their website. Right?
Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense. If you want to empower your developers to build great products for your customers, you need to provide them with great tools. You need to give them that great experience as well.
Exactly. And Amazon, I mean, they're the great example. They're a testament to that approach, right? And another company that's, I think, doing some really cool stuff with IDPs is is Airbnb.
Okay.
They built this platform that's really, really focused on developer self-service and automation.
Yeah, which I imagine is crucial, right, for a company like Airbnb. They rely so heavily on technology. They got to be able to connect, travelers and hosts all over the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And their platform really allows developers to just quickly spin up new environments, deploy code, manage infrastructure, and that just lets them move really, really fast.
So it sounds like these IDPs are becoming a key enabler for companies that want to, be able to move quickly, stay ahead of the curve.
That's exactly it. And it's not just, these tech giants. We're seeing IDPs being adopted, in all sorts of industries from, finance to healthcare to retail. I mean, everybody, manufacturing, everybody. It's really cutting across all industries.
So it's really becoming like this core part of how we think about building software today.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so exciting. It's changing how we think about software development, moving away from, that old, very manual, very rigid way of doing things to this, much more automated, much more self-service, much more developer-focused approach.
It sounds like, we're moving towards this future where building software is less about, fighting against all that complexity and more about, unleashing that creativity and innovation.
I think so too. I think
Yeah.
we're moving in that direction, and it's really exciting to see.
Now, for those listening who are, really interested in this, they're intrigued by this whole idea of IDPs and they want to learn more. What are some practical steps? Where do they even begin? What are some things they can do?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say the first thing you really need to do is just talk to your developers. Really understand what are the challenges they're facing.
Yeah, get those insights straight from the source.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Talk to them, do surveys, observe, what are they doing? What's their workflow? Where are the pain points? What's frustrating them? What processes seem really inefficient? Yeah. And once you have a good understanding of what they're struggling with, then you can start exploring different IDP solutions. And there are a lot out there, right?
Yeah. Open source, commercial, all sorts of stuff.
Yeah. It's really important to do that research and, choose the one that really fits your needs, that fits your technology.
Right. It's not one size fits all. It's really about finding the right platform for you.
Exactly. And don't try to reinvent the wheel. Look at the tools you already have, leverage those, integrate those into your IDP.
It's about denting that seamless experience. It's about making it feel like it's just an extension of their daily work.
Right, exactly. And remember, communication is key. Keep your developers in the loop.
Keep them involved in the whole process, right?
Absolutely. From the beginning to the end, get their feedback, make them feel like, they're part of this. This is a collaborative effort.
Okay, so we talked about, kind of the practical steps, building an IDP, but let's think bigger for a second.
Okay.
What does this widespread adoption of IDPs, what does this mean for, the future of software development? What are we seeing here?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think, to me, it really signals a fundamental shift, how we think about developing software.
Yeah.
It's moving away from, this idea of developers as, just code monkeys, right? Just churning out code all day long. It's about seeing developers as, these empowered, these product owners, they're the ones driving the innovation.
It's about recognizing their strategic importance within a company, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think, this shift, it's going to have a huge impact.
Yeah.
On the entire tech industry. We're going to see, organizations being much more agile, much more innovative, much more responsive to the needs of, their customers, both internal and external.
Sounds like everybody wins, right?
I think so, yeah. Developers get a better experience, companies get better software, and the end users, they benefit from, these more innovative and, more user-friendly products.
That's the dream, right?
It is. And I think, with IDPs, I think it's achievable.
And as we keep exploring this, this whole world of IDPs, I'm excited to see what the future holds, honestly. I think there's a lot of potential here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an exciting time to be in software development, that's for sure.
Now, you mentioned earlier that, there's a lot of discussion, there's a lot of debate around IDPs. What are some of the the main questions or the concerns that you're seeing? What are people worried about?
Yeah, I think one common concern is, complexity.
Okay.
Are we just adding another layer of complexity, right?
Right.
Because we're essentially building another platform on top of, all the stuff we already have.
So the worry is that instead of, making things simpler, we're actually making things more complicated.
Yeah, that's a valid concern. But I think in reality, a well-designed IDP, it should actually reduce complexity,
Oh,
in the long run,
how so?
because, it abstracts away all of that underlying infrastructure. It gives developers those self-service tools. So you're eliminating all of those manual processes, all those workarounds that, create that complexity in the first place.
So it's like we're shifting the complexity, right, to a centralized platform,
Yeah.
and that platform can be managed, much more effectively.
Exactly. And that frees up developers to, focus on the stuff that really matters.
Mm.
The stuff that requires their unique skills and creativity.
Now, another concern I've heard is that, these IDPs, they might actually limit flexibility, because you're providing this, this more structured environment. Does that mean that, developers are less able to experiment, to try new things, to be innovative?
Yeah, that's a good point. And it is important to, to strike that balance.
Right.
Like I said earlier, the best IDPs, they provide those guardrails, but they also, they allow for that flexibility for experimentation.
So it's about finding that sweet spot, that balance between, providing that structure and that guidance,
Yeah.
but without stifling creativity.
Exactly. It's about empowering developers to, to make those decisions, to choose those tools and approaches that work best for them, while still ensuring, consistency, adherence to best practices.
Okay, so we've talked about some of the concerns, some of the challenges, but let's look at the other side of that. Like, what are some of the most exciting possibilities that IDPs are opening up? Like, what's on the horizon for for this whole world of IDPs?
Yeah, I think, one of the most exciting areas, is just the integration of AI and machine learning into IDPs.
Okay, yeah, I've heard a little bit about that. What's going on there?
So imagine, right? Imagine a platform, and this is not science fiction, right? This is actually happening now.
Okay.
Imagine a platform that can, kind of anticipate your needs.
Okay.
They can suggest solutions. They can even automate tasks,
Yeah.
based on what you've done in the past.
Wow. So it's almost like having a personal assistant, but for software development.
Exactly. Exactly. And we're already seeing IDPs that can, automatically detect and resolve security vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
That can optimize, resource allocation. They can even generate code snippets based on, just natural language descriptions.
Wow, that's incredible.
It is. It's really about, augmenting what humans can do
Right.
and freeing up developers to focus on the really, the creative stuff, the strategic stuff.
Right. The things that, that computers can't do, but humans can.
Exactly. And that's just the beginning.
Yeah.
I think we're really at the beginning of this new era, in software development.
Yeah.
Powered by AI, driven by data, and really focused on creating, these really exceptional experiences for developers and end users alike.
Yeah. Sounds like a pretty exciting time to be in the software development world.
It really is.
Mhm.
And IDPs are, they're really at the heart of it all.
Yeah.
They're really shaping this future.
Now, before we wrap things up, I want to go back to something we talked about earlier, this idea of culture, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned that IDPs, they require a cultural shift.
They do.
Can you kind of unpack that a little bit more? Like what are some of those key cultural elements? Like what does a company need to have in place to make sure that their IDP is actually successful?
Yeah. I think one of the most important is just trust.
Okay.
That culture of trust and empowerment, because like I said before, IDPs are all about giving developers the power to make those decisions, to manage their own resources. And that requires a really high level of trust, between the developers and the managers, the leadership.
So it's about letting go of that control,
Right.
and embracing that more, that more collaborative, the more autonomous approach.
Yeah, exactly. And that can be, for some organizations, that's tough. It's really about being willing to give up some of that control and try this new way of working.
Yeah. It's a big shift. Another thing that I've heard is important is, this focus on continuous learning, continuous improvement.
Absolutely.
IDPs they're constantly evolving.
They are.
And organizations, they need to be able to adapt as well. They need to learn along the way.
That's right. They're not, set it and forget it.
Right.
You need to constantly be paying attention, constantly be refining them.
Yeah. So it's about having that growth mindset.
Exactly.
both for, for the individuals, but also for the organization as a whole.
That's right. And that means, having a culture that really values that experimentation,
Mm.
that encourages feedback,
Hmm.
that celebrates the successes, but also, learns from those failures, sees those as opportunities to improve.
Okay, so we've got trust, we've got empowerment, we've got this culture of continuous learning. Anything else? Any other key elements that you think are really, really crucial for making an IDP successful?
Yeah, one more that I would add is really that customer centricity.
Okay.
Remember, like I said before, the best IDPs are the ones that really treat their developers as their customers.
Right.
Right. We
Mhm.
want to provide them with that great experience, that seamless experience that empowers them to do their best work.
So it's about applying those same principles of, customer experience, but to the internal developer experience.
Exactly. And that means you really need to understand your developers.
Mm.
What do they need? What are their workflows? What are those pain points? It's about putting developers, right at the center, making sure that the platform is meeting their needs.
Yeah, it sounds like, building a successful IDP really is this holistic approach, right?
It is.
You can't just focus on the technology, you got to focus on the culture as well.
Exactly. It's not just about, the tools. It's about the environment.
Sure.
It's about that, that culture of trust, that empowerment, that continuous learning, where developers can really thrive, where innovation can flourish.
Well, this has been, incredibly insightful. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. I'm always happy to talk about IDPs.
Yeah.
I'm really excited about this space. I think it has so much potential.
Now, before we move on to, the last part of our deep dive here, I want to pause for a second and just invite our listeners to kind of reflect on what they've heard so far. What are your thoughts on, this whole IDP concept? Do you think this is a promising solution,
Yeah.
to these challenges that we're facing in software development?
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts on the website, social media, whatever.
Yeah. We always love to hear what you guys are thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. The world of IDPs is constantly changing, and we're all in this together. We're all learning. So keep exploring, keep experimenting, and, keep pushing the boundaries.
Okay, so we've explored, the what and the why of IDPs, but let's talk about the how.
Okay.
For anyone listening who's thinking like, all right, this sounds fantastic, but like, where do I even begin? What advice would you give them? What are those first steps?
I think the most crucial first step, honestly, is just shifting your mindset.
Okay.
Instead of viewing your developers as just, coders churning out code,
Right.
start thinking of them as your internal customers.
Okay.
Just like any successful business, you really need to understand their needs. You need to understand what are their pain points, what are their desired outcomes.
So conducting like thorough user research is key, even for something as seemingly internal as an IDP.
Absolutely. Talk to your developers, conduct surveys, observe their daily workflows. What are the bottlenecks they're encountering? What tools are frustrating them? What processes feel clunky or inefficient?
Right.
These insights, they're going to be so valuable as you start to shape your IDP strategy.
So it's about, pinpointing those areas where an IDP can really make a difference.
Yeah,
Those quick wins that can really demonstrate the value and kind of get that momentum going.
exactly. And once you have that solid understanding,
Yeah.
once you really understand what your developers need, then you can start exploring the different IDP options that are available.
Right.
There are a ton of, both open source and commercial platforms out there, each with its own, strengths and weaknesses.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. You really need to find the platform that aligns with your organization, your specific context, your tech stack, your culture,
Exactly.
your goals.
Precisely.
Right.
And, you don't have to build everything from scratch.
Right.
Leverage those existing tools, leverage existing services wherever possible.
Mm-hmm.
Integrate them into your IDP and just focus on creating that seamless, intuitive experience for your developers.
Yeah, it's about, building a platform that feels like an extension of their existing workflow,
Right.
not like this separate thing that they have to constantly be switching back and forth between.
Exactly. And don't forget about communication.
Yeah.
Keep your developers in the loop throughout this entire process.
So involve them in the design, get their feedback at every stage, make them feel like they're, part of the solution.
Exactly. Building an IDP should be a collaborative effort,
Right.
not a top-down mandate.
Right.
The more engaged your developers are, the more successful your implementation will be.
That makes sense. Okay, so we've talked about, some of the practical steps involved in building an IDP.
Yeah.
But let's zoom out for a second and think about, the bigger picture.
Okay.
What does this widespread adoption of IDPs, what does this mean for the future of software development as a whole?
Yeah, to me, I think it really signals a fundamental shift in how we think about software development.
Go.
We're moving away from that traditional model of developers as, just code monkeys, just churning out lines of code in isolation,
Right.
to a model of developers as empowered product owners, driving innovation, delivering value to their internal customers.
So it's about recognizing the strategic importance of developers within an organization.
Yeah.
Not just as, technical resources, but as, key drivers of business value.
Exactly. And I think that this shift, it's going to have a huge impact on the entire tech industry.
Okay.
We're going to see companies becoming much more agile, more innovative, more responsive to the needs of their customers.
Both internal and external.
Exactly.
Sounds like a win-win for everyone involved. Developers get a better experience, companies get better software, and ultimately the end users, they benefit from, more innovative, more user-friendly products.
That's the goal. That's the vision. And I think, it's a vision worth striving for.
Yeah, I agree. And as we continue to explore this world of IDPs, I'm really excited to see what the future holds. I think this is a really transformative technology with a lot of potential.
Absolutely.
Well, on that note of, cautious optimism and boundless potential, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into internal developer platforms.
Yeah.
Hopefully everyone listening, you've gained some valuable insights, you've sparked some new ideas, and maybe you're even feeling inspired to make a change in your own little corner of the software development world.
Absolutely. And if you're left with any, burning questions or insightful observations, don't hesitate to reach out.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, we'd love to keep the conversation going.
Exactly. The world of IDPs is, it's constantly changing. We're all learning together.
That's right.
So keep exploring, keep experimenting, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
Until next time, happy coding.